So the big question is, if I play video games, will I become violent? Well, maybe the question is, if I play violent video games, will I become a violent person? Now, these are good questions, and they're questions that people ask frequently in terms of what's causing maybe increased violence in our younger generations. Is it the violence that they're seeing? How is it that we're seeing increases in violence? It must be the video games, is one of the common explanations. But remember, correlation does not mean causation. We learned that in a previous chapter. So let's make sure we pay attention to maybe some of the aspects that make more sense on what we learn, how we learn, and how we then demonstrate what we know. Welcome to this chapter. This is about learning. So the first thing we have to make sure we identify is that there are behaviors that we have that are not learned. Unlike what that Skinner said, remember B.F. Skinner, he actually thought that every behavior was learned. But we know that that's not actually true, not throughout the animal kingdom. There are actually instincts and reflexes, and those are behaviors that aren't learned. So you might have some flinching that happens when somebody goes right at your face. That is not a learned behavior. Small infants also have reflexes and instincts. So they also flinch or blink when they see something coming at their eyes in their visual field. Those are absolutely the kinds of things that we want to identify as reflexes or instincts. And those are part of what we understand at that core primitive part of our brain. That's what keeps us alive. Instincts and reflexes are about keeping us safe and keeping us alive. It's actually what psychologists think of as part of the evolutionary or adaptive feature of our behavior. So let's break it down a little bit. Reflexes are the things that are automatic. Instincts are more of the drive that compel us. So if you think about a reflex, that's like an auto response. But instincts are the things that motivate or compel. So if you're thirsty, that is actually going to be a sensation in your body that creates this instinctive search for something to drink, like water or some other liquid that's going to satiate that compelling need that the body has. Hunger is the same way. There are other kinds of instincts that are actually a part of humans and other animals that are there to keep us from becoming extinct. So think about reflexes as the auto responses and instincts as those things that are intentional motivators to keep the organism alive. So what is learning? Part of what we have to understand is, what are we talking about when we think about this concept of learning? You are in school. You're actually learning many things, some of them on purpose, and some of them maybe not intentional for you or your instructors, but you're learning them. Some of them are about this intentional behavior or knowledge acquisition so that you can become adapted to a new expectation or performance that you're going to be required to do. So let's take a simple one like reading. Actually, it's not that simple. I don't know if you can remember back to when you were quite young and you were just learning your letters or your sounds. All of those aspects are very intentional and purposeful. And remember, this is not a reflex. We don't reflexively read. It's also not an instinct. It can be something that we then recognize there's benefit to doing this, and I have motivation now to do the work to develop the knowledge and the behaviors that are associated with the knowledge. All of us have the benefit when we learn how to read. We get to navigate all sorts of information for entertainment, for how-tos in terms of navigating problem solving, and for perhaps adventure or creativity. All of those components are the rewards we get from learning a specific behavior and learning then how to use it well. One aspect of learning that we want to understand is this idea of associative learning. So learning can be related to classical conditioning, operant conditioning, or observational learning. But when we think about associative learning, that's that component of where we learn something that's connected to a stimuli or event within our environment. We make associations. And actually, there are some aspects of learning that we might think of as context-dependent learning. And if you're wondering how to prepare for an exam or how to do your best in certain situations, practicing in the situation where you're going to have to perform is one of the things that would allow for associations with that setting. Using the same writing tool might be important. Even wearing the same socks or other clothing that are a part of that, they become associations that help you both in the storage and then the retrieval of that information that is necessary for whatever performance is involved in that exercise. Let's expand our understanding of these associations. I don't know how much experience you have with someone dealing with cancer treatment, but frequently the treatments for cancer change the way our taste buds work. And a lot of times the foods that that individual would eat while they're in treatment have now changed to a point where there's now a negative association. They could taste bad, or they could just taste like this aspect of that's what I ate when I was going through cancer treatments. And now from there on forward, that cancer patient, even though they may be in remission or cured, whenever they come across that flavor or that food, they're going to have a strong association with that, and it then is associated with something that they may not have positive feelings about. So, for example, I'll tell you about my son. My son had an experience with split pea soup. And I'll tell you, I make very good split pea soup, but I made split pea soup, and that time, right after dinner, he ended up getting the flu. And yes, it was that stomach flu, and the split pea soup became something he could see later. And in that, he then associated split pea soup with things that didn't feel good, and he's never eaten split pea soup since. I'm pretty sure he would think it tastes good, but I don't know if he could get past the associated learning that goes with split pea soup. Fortunately, there's a lot of other things to eat in this world besides split pea soup. Association learning begins so early that we see it in infants. Infants actually have a reflex. Remember, that's that thing that they don't need any kind of learning or even intention. They have a reflex to suck, which is what keeps them alive. They need to suck on a nipple in order to get food. And what we do see with infants is that once they start at about a month old, after they've been trained that a bottle has a nipple that food comes out of, they even start that sucking action before the bottle gets anywhere near their mouth. So they now associate that that is this tool that's going to help me get that reward I want, and they can get their sucking action on their mouth ready for the feeding to begin. The next component we want to talk about is this idea of observational learning. And you probably know this in a lot of ways in your life at this point. Think of this as modeling. You've had a number of models who have been in your life who have demonstrated the way things would be best. They've shown you how to do those things. This is what observational learning is. So if you play an instrument, if you play a sport, if there's any kind of skill that you've learned, it's likely that you've watched a model demonstrate how it's done. Now, those models can be live in-person models, or they can actually be in a book or in a video form, any aspect where it's modeled for you, that specific behavior. What it is we're imitating. So much of what we learn foundationally in our early years is modeled for us. So much of what we then watch for as cues for what is expected behavior is learned by watching the situation to identify what are the appropriate behaviors in this situation. Observational learning and modeling is something that we will use throughout our lives. These are the components that make up some of the beginning aspects of this chapter on learning. Next, we'll go into some of the details related to classical and operant conditioning.